It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story.
Trophy.
A trophy, well, yeah.
Sky News meets the Ukrainian soldiers at the heart of Zelensky's incursion, and our security and defence editor sees their Russian prisoners of war.
They say they're being well treated here inside Ukraine, but they hope that they can be swapped for Ukrainian prisoners of war so they can go home.
The Middle East on a knife edge. Iran says it's poised to attack Israel if Gaza ceasefire talks fail to reach an agreement. Also tonight, inflation rises for the first time this year, but it's not enough to dash hopes of another interest rate cut. Attacks on the railways, the alarming increase in violent crime against women on British trains. The toxic chemical spill that caused a major incident on a 12-mile stretch of waterways in the West Midlands. The mystery of Stonehenge. How was a 6-ton stone moved 500 miles from the tip of northeast Scotland to Wiltshire? Let us have a joke. Liz Truss fails to see the funny side as protesters target an event promoting her book. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. Sky News has travelled to Ukraine's border to meet soldiers at the heart of President Zelensky's daring operation to enter Russia. Our defence and security editor was given access to some of the hundreds of Russian prisoners of war taken during the assault. Tonight, President Zelensky has said Ukraine is achieving its strategic goal in the Kursk region and says it's pushing inland as the surprising invasion enters its second week. Russia has mobilised military reserves and declared an anti-terrorist lockdown in the regions of Kursk, Belgorod and Bryansk. There's also been a regional emergency declared in Belgorod amid heavy Ukrainian shelling. Ukrainian forces have continued to take ground inside Russia, pushing forward up to an additional 2 kilometres inside the Kursk region today. Our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, sent this report from the Ukrainian border near Kursk.
Every military vehicle bearing this mark is part of Ukraine's mission inside Russia. At the border, we meet soldiers who've been on the operation from the start.
Oh, wow. So what, you got that from a soldier?
Yes.
They show me a captured rifle.
Trophy.
A trophy, well, yeah.
And other souvenirs.
And they're running away, you say? They run away?
Yes, they're running away. Just drop everything and running away.
Yeah. So do you think you can go further into Russia?
Yes.
Vladimir Putin has ordered his forces to repel the invasion. But these troops haven't been deterred as they head back into Russia's Kursk region. We follow as far as the crossing point.
We're at the Ukrainian side of one of the crossing points just over there. That's the Russian checkpoint. You can see there are vehicles, Ukrainian vehicles. They've got the triangle of this operation moving across into the border. This was the place from where Ukraine launched its counter-offensive.
But the troops standing guard here are on edge because there's still a risk from next door. It means we can't stay for long.
We've been told that there's been a drone strike here recently and it's just not safe to wait around, so they've asked us to leave.
With Russia just on the other side of that fence, this region of northeastern Ukraine has long been in range of its firepower. Driving away from the border, we pass the rubble of a recent strike. But also a lot of Ukrainian armour heading in the opposite direction to fight back. As well as seizing land, Ukraine has also taken hundreds of prisoners of war in the assault. Sky News was given access to a site where dozens have been held, many of them young conscripts. They're kept in small rooms in the cells along this corridor. We're not showing the Russian detainees in compliance with international law, but we did talk to some.
They describe their shock at being captured They say they're being well treated here inside Ukraine, but they hope that they can be swapped for Ukrainian prisoners of war so they can go home.
One official says more than 200 detainees have passed through here since the assault began on the 6th of August.
If everything checks out, they're sent to detention camps. These camps house other prisoners of war, where they await exchange.
For those locked away on both sides, that day surely can't come soon enough.
And we can speak to Deborah now, who's in northeastern Ukraine. And Deborah, the Ukrainian government are saying that their troops have advanced even further into Russia today. How big a crisis is this for Vladimir Putin, and how is it impacting his ability to wage war in Ukraine?
This is a significant crisis for President Putin. It's the first time his country has been invaded in any way since the Second World War. He's ordered his commanders to push the Ukrainians off Russian soil, and yet, as you say, they're still advancing. As for the Russian war in Ukraine, there are reports that Moscow is having to pull out some of its troops from frontline positions in Ukraine to shore up defences in Russia. But just as this operation is putting huge pressure on Moscow, it's also stretching already undermanned positions on the Ukrainian side too. Ukraine will be hoping that this stunning move will change the course of the whole war in its favour and also undermine the credibility of Vladimir Putin inside his own country. But President Putin has faced perilous moments in the past and he's always bounced back, so he will surely be hoping he can do that again.
Thank you. The Middle East is on a knife edge tonight on the eve of Gaza ceasefire talks. The US envoy to the Middle East says he believes a war between Israel and Lebanon's Hezbollah can be avoided. But Iranian officials say Iran will attack Israel directly if the talks scheduled tomorrow in Qatar fail to reach an agreement. Our special correspondent Alex Crawford reports from Lebanon.
These are children, he says. Anger over the continued killing is raw. There's no let-up in the Israeli bombing of Gaza. Multiple bloodied children. Whole families being wiped out. And this in the countdown to talks aimed at brokering a ceasefire. Hamas says it won't attend the talks because they told us the Israeli government's setting new conditions. The Israeli delegation will attend, and they insist it's Hamas who's holding up a deal.
It is Hamas that continues to set additional terms and has refused to reach an agreement.
But that's not believed by others in the region, and the US Special Envoy flew to Beirut to avert regional war. He is relying on messengers, like Lebanon's parliamentary speaker, an important conduit with Hezbollah, which is a designated terror group by the US, UK and others. All smiles here, but without the cameras, the discussions sound tense, with a Lebanese politician telling reporters later he'd passed on his deep concerns about, in his words, the cross-border assassination and daily Israeli massacres against children and civilians. There's more than a hint of growing frustration.
There's no more time to waste, and there's no more valid excuses from any party for any further delay.
The US envoy's diplomatic mission is tough. He says the talks in Doha will go on for several days, indirectly with Hamas if necessary.
There's really high stakes with this frantic diplomatic activity because if the ceasefire talks don't progress, if they're not visibly seen to make progress, then most analysts are predicting there will almost certainly be a retaliation from Iran and Hezbollah, possibly even coordinated.
The ceasefire talks take place as Palestinians say the Gaza dead are nearing 40,000 now. More than 100 Israeli hostages are still being held. And the ambassadors of UK, US and Germany made a joint call for their release ahead of the talks.
There can be no further delay. Now is the time for a deal that sees the immediate return of the hostages and a ceasefire in Gaza.
The US envoy's warning regional tensions could easily slip out of control, with more deaths and injuries. The stakes could not be higher. Alex Crawford, Sky News, Beirut.
The UK's rate of inflation has risen for the first time this year, but not enough to dampen hopes of another interest rate cut. Overall, prices rose by 2.2% in the year to July, slightly above the Bank of England's target rate of 2%. The bank says higher energy bills were the main cause for the jump. Our business correspondent Paul Kelso has been looking at the numbers.
A busy week of economic data, perhaps the most eagerly awaited number of all, inflation. What's happening? What happened in July, in the year to July? We can see the path of inflation ever since the cost of living crisis began, rising up more than 11% in October 2022. Been falling, not necessarily evenly, but certainly all of this year until today. This little uptick here, this little hockey stick, an increase in CPI inflation to 2.2%. That after it was down at the Bank of England's target rate for a couple of months. So what's caused it? Well, the underlying reason, the biggest reason, is something that's no longer in the inflation numbers. This is the energy price cap chart. We've all paid attention to this as our bills have gone up. Inflation's an annual figure, and a year ago, we were counting in the inflation figures this huge fall in the energy price cap, more than £1,100. Well, this fall has now been replaced by this much smaller fall in the energy price cap last month, just about £110. When you take that number away, you have a higher inflation number as a result. The underlying numbers tell a slightly different story. CPI inflation is still the red number here. Look at the blue one. It's services inflation. Makes up the bulk of the British economy, stubbornly high, above 6% for a long time. The Bank of England's been watching closely. They'll be pleased to see this decline, a softening in that inflation. The yellow line's goods inflation. That's been subterranean below zero. That's now coming back up, which the Bank of England will also welcome. Food inflation, we should make a quick point here. We saw food prices rise enormously, but they've been falling for 15 months, again, until today. A little increase in food inflation, that will be one that consumers will keep an eye on. I should say that prices are still about 20% higher than they were. It's the inflation that's returned closer to normal, not the overall prices. What does this all mean for interest rates? That will concern mortgage holders, borrowers and savers alike. Well, the market, this red line shows the expectations of the market. They think there's going to be a further cut. We can see here the Bank of England raised interest rates on that staircase, plateaued, 0.25% cut last month. The expectations are 90% that there'll be a cut in November and another one in December, with those cuts continuing. Similar expectations in the United States, where their inflation figures have come in about 2.9%, in line with expectation. I think one thing we can say on either side of the Atlantic, those days of super low interest rates that we might have got used to, well, they are a thing of the past.
Violent attacks against women and girls travelling on trains have increased by 50% in the last 2 years. Figures from the British Transport Police show the number of crimes rose to more than 11,000 in 2023. The survey also found reports of sexual harassment reports doubled. Sadia Chowdhury reports.
Hira Hussain says she was sexually assaulted on a train to Glasgow. A man approached, she says, before attempting to grope her.
It made me feel really unsafe because it was a train journey I did a lot, and I'm very fiercely independent, and I often get told by my family or my partner, don't take the night train, go early, go while it's daylight, and I get personally really irritated by that.
Hira reported the incident, but charges against the man were later dropped.
The whole exercise felt so futile and a waste of time and money. And actually what I really wanted was just for him to apologize to me and recognize that what he was doing was not right.
It may have felt futile in Hira's case, but reported offences help paint a picture of the risks to women on Britain's railways. Data from British Transport Police provides the facts. This year, reports of sexual offences jumped 10%. And there was a 20% increase in violent crimes against women and girls. But the numbers weren't exactly low to begin with. The force told us it's an indication that more people are reporting offences, but warned the real picture could be worse.
I still think it's anywhere between 10 and 15% of actually what's happening in the UK to women and girls is being reported. So if you take that data as read, then actually this is good news for us, because that campaigns, or consistent campaigns we've been running over that 4 or 5 year period, is starting to now show the increases that we expect. We still don't think we're at the pinnacle of that reporting. We think we're at the tip of the iceberg.
Catcalling, touching, upskirting and indecent exposure is recorded as rising, and just over half of female victims say other rail passengers intervened to try to help. Today, the Victims Minister ruled out support for women-only carriages.
The day that I asked women to be changing their behaviours in order that they are not assaulted on our transport system is a day that you can absolutely take to the airways and say that I had failed.
A new anti-sexual harassment campaign is launching on trains. It aims to educate passengers on how to recognise potential situations and intervene safely. Sadia Chowdhury, Sky News in London.
The World Health Organization has declared Mpox outbreaks in Africa as a global health emergency. There have been more than 15,000 suspected cases of Mpox in Africa this year, and 461 people have died, mainly in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Mpox is known to spread through close contact with infected people, including via sex. But scientists are concerned about a new strain of Mpox, which was first reported earlier this year and can kill up to 10% of people and spread more easily. So far, the vast majority of cases and deaths in the Congo are among children under 15. The Director General of the World Health Organization says the outbreak is very worrying.
Today, the emergency committee met and advised me that, in its view, the situation constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. I have accepted that advice. The detection and rapid spread of a new clade of Mpox in eastern DRC, its detection in neighboring countries that had not previously reported Mpox, and the potential for further spread within Africa and beyond is very worrying.
Train drivers are to vote on a new offer aimed at ending their long-running pay dispute. ASLEF said a deal had been agreed in principle with the Department for Transport, which it will put to its members. If members approve, it could bring an end to a standoff with 16 English train operating companies stretching back to July 2022. The deal that ASLEF has agreed to put to its members is a 5% pay rise for the financial year 2022-23. A 4.75% increase for the year 2023 to 24, and a 4.5% rise for 2024-25, all backdated and pensionable. Court proceedings have continued against hundreds of people charged over their role in the violent unrest which followed after the Southport stabbings. Today, a 60-year-old man has been jailed for 2 years and 8 months for taking part in rioting in Rotherham. Glyn Guest pulled a police officer to the ground by his shield outside a hotel housing asylum seekers.
You have brought shame on yourself and the town of which you are a resident. You must be punished for what you did. The only mitigation, as I have indicated, is your guilty plea. Accordingly, the sentence is reduced to one of 2 years and 8 months imprisonment.
A major incident has been declared following a toxic chemical spillage in a canal in the West Midlands. People have been told to avoid a 12-mile stretch of the canal network from the Walsall Lock to the locks at Rushall, Riders Green and Perry Bar as a precautionary measure. Fraser Maud reports.
It's a depressing sight. Dozens of fish floating dead in the water after a toxic chemical spill that sparked a major incident response. 12 miles of canal towpaths were closed to the public, stretching from Pleck in Walsall to Perry Bar in Birmingham. The Environment Agency has identified this metal plating company, Anachrome Limited, as the source of the spill. They self-reported the incident, which involved sodium cyanide, a chemical which, if brought into direct contact with the skin or ingested, can cause sickness, dizziness, confusion, a change in heart rate, and even loss of consciousness or seizures. In a statement to Sky News, Anachrome Limited confirmed the leak and said that our immediate response was to notify the Environment Agency and Severn Trent Water. Our senior management team has been and remain on site, working collaboratively with all relevant authorities and agencies to minimise and contain the spill. They go on to say the safety of our community and the environment is our top priority. We're focused on limiting the impact of this incident and will provide further updates as they become available.
What we have identified is that the source of this pollution has come from a company that the Environment Agency regulates, Anachrome Limited. They are working with us and we are carrying out a very thorough investigation as to the cause of this. If we find any wrongdoing, then we will take all the necessary enforcement action against the company because this pollution is unacceptable.
Since the incident began, the Environment Agency has been monitoring the Walsall Canal and its connected waterways to determine the severity and extent of the spill. Kieran Smith runs a fishery close to the canal and is concerned about possible cross-contamination. Like many local anglers, he's been left devastated by news of the pollution.
Very rare you'll find a fish that fends any further than its own little section. It's wiping section after section, so there's no fish in them sections of canal. How am they going to breed new fish when there's no fish in there?
As the investigation into the cause continues, it's feared the environmental impact of the contamination on fish stocks and the rest of the ecosystem may not be known for weeks, months, or even years. Fraser Maud, Sky News, Walsall.
A Sky News investigation has found the Islamic State is using TikTok to turbocharge its recruitment efforts. On the app, some accounts are making content with Islamic State supporting songs to bypass the platform's content moderators. Our data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire has more.
The posts on TikTok are harmless enough. Pics at the gym, a seaside view at night, horses galloping down the beach. Listen carefully though, they all have the same soundtrack, less innocent. A type of song called a nasheed, but one in this case that celebrates Islamic State, with the words of a member of Islamic State laid on top.
The thing with TikTok is that if you hit a button down here on the bottom, which shows you all the other videos that have the same audio, and again, some of those are pretty harmless, but some of those have more extreme content, originally put out by Islamic State itself. They are much more explicit in their support for Islamic State or IS, showing IS fighters, equipment. Others show prisoners digging their graves. We found thousands of posts across different nasheeds celebrating Islamic State. Now, some of those have been removed, but they keep popping up. And the worry is that this is being spread pretty innocuously, people maybe not even knowing what they're posting. But you hit that audio hashtag button and you're pulled into a world of Islamic State propaganda. Disseminating Islamic State or any terrorist content online is an offence. As is often the case with extremist material, it's unclear how much of the content we discovered was posted in a genuine effort to radicalise audiences or was instead intended to shock or amuse viewers, and which posts were simply unaware of the IS content.
We've seen Islamic State supporters use nasheeds and remix them in ways that we didn't think was possible. We've seen them on video game footage. We've seen them on baby photos. Like, it is a thing where there is some deliberate use of those groups' nasheeds. And then there are definitely members of the wider online community that just think it sounds cool.
We took our findings to TikTok. A spokesperson told us, "We stand firmly against violent extremism and have banned all of the accounts and content flagged to us. We regularly train our safety teams to detect evolving extremist trends and remove 98% of content found to break rules on promoting terrorism before it is reported to us." This was a post taken directly from Islamic State's official media channels, freely available on TikTok until we flagged it. Deliberate or not, it is apparently easy for the harmless and the harmful to exist side by side. The audio, the common thread that links them. Tom Cheshire, Sky News.
Stonehenge is perhaps the world's most famous prehistoric monument. For more than a century, archaeologists have known that some of its stones somehow came from Wales to Salisbury Plain. Now, scientists have discovered that the largest altar stone at the heart of the structure might actually have come from 500 miles away in north-east Scotland. But how? Thomas Moore reports.
The mystery of Stonehenge just got deeper. New research reveals that 5,000 years ago, the altar stone, largely buried at the centre of the ring, was brought from northern Scotland and not from Wales as previously thought. Somehow, Neolithic people with only primitive tools moved a 6-ton rock the length of Britain. The scientists were stunned.
This sort of transportation distance is amazing. It looks like a sandstone rock that's micaceous, so it's a little bit glittery. You would think, oh wow, there's rocks like this in pretty close to here. I would have expected it to come from there, but no, absolutely gobsmacked. It's definitely Scottish. So.
And well worth bringing that distance, quite clearly.
For these people, that rock had a lot of significance.
The new finding means Stonehenge was built with rocks brought from across the island of Britain. The largest, the 25-ton sarsen stones, were brought from the Marlborough Downs in Wiltshire, just 20 miles away. The smaller blue stones were transported from the Preseli Hills in West Wales, a distance of 140 miles. And now research shows the altar stone came the furthest, 500 miles from the Orcadian Basin that lies north of Inverness. How exactly the stone was transported so far is unclear. If it came over land, people would have had to bring it through dense forests and over mountains. Alternatively, it could have been brought by sea on a giant raft. But this is a huge stone. The geologists used techniques from the mining industry to study crystals within the altar stone. It provided a unique signature that matched rocks in Scotland.
It certainly implies a huge level of communication, exchange, people travelling. It's quite hard for us with our modern mindset, I think, to imagine.
The finding gives archaeologists more to ponder. Stonehenge was probably a temple, but why a rock from Scotland had such significance is a puzzle. Thomas Moore, Sky News in Wiltshire.
Things didn't go quite as planned for Liz Truss while she appeared at an event in Suffolk, as a banner showing a picture of a lettuce and the words "I crashed the economy" was unfurled above her. It led to the former Prime Minister making another earlier-than-expected exit from the spotlight. As Matthew Thompson reports, it certainly wasn't one of her salad days.
I think it was Bill Clinton's advisor who said it's the economy stupid.
Liz Truss hasn't been having much luck lately. A bruising election defeat, and now, on her book tour, a surprise visit from her old nemesis. She didn't seem to find it funny. But funny or not, to understand the joke, we need to go back to her brief and chaotic time as Prime Minister.
I have a bold plan to grow the economy.
A disastrous mini-budget spooked markets and Tory MPs. And in the dying days of her premiership, a tabloid pitted her directly against an iceberg lettuce. The lettuce won.
We should be proud of who we are, where we come from.
The latest stunt was straight from the playbook of left-wing campaigners led by donkeys, who recently targeted Nigel Farage in similar fashion. In a statement on X, Liz Truss said, "What happened last night was not funny. Far-left activists disrupted the event, which then had to be stopped for security reasons. This is done to intimidate people and suppress free speech. I won't stand for it." Would we see the same reaction if the activists were far-right? And perhaps this does raise some questions about security arrangements for former Prime Ministers. But mostly it shows that a joke which has dogged Liz Truss from her time in Number 10 right through to the election and beyond has a longer shelf life than she might have hoped. Matthew Thompson, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the political journalist, Zoe Grunewald, and the Daily Mail's Whitehall editor, Claire Ellicott. Amongst the stories, we'll be discussing this on the front of The Guardian. Its headline, Ukraine moves deeper into Russia and targets air bases. We'll be right back with that story and others. Do stay with us.